And this is the habitat. Maybe we can look around. Maybe we can even see a solitary bee hole or burrow somewhere here. Well, here it is. Most probably it's a solitary bee hole.
Wow! Hello and welcome to Wild Cities, the podcast. I'm Chris Fitch. In this series, I'm sharing stories from cities around the world that feature in my new book, Wild Cities, that's published this week on Thursday. In this episode, I'm remembering my trip to Tallinn, Estonia, as I learnt on a bike ride through the city with Meelis Uustul, nature conservation specialist for Tallinn. The city has taken several steps to make the urban landscape a more comfortable environment for pollinating insects. In this conversation, I began by asking Meelis why this matters at all, why we should care about the fate of the world's pollinators.
Pollinators are providing a very vital service for us because quite a large proportion of our everyday food depends on whether we have pollinator insects doing their work. So it's the same thing either you're in the countryside or in urban areas. And in fact, more and more people are growing their own food in urban areas. We have allotment gardens popping up everywhere around the world in cities. We have allotment gardens, community gardens, private gardens, and we need pollinators even there. But beside that they are useful for us. It's quite counterintuitive, but towns and cities can be even a haven for different species of pollinators and even endangered species. So we tend to think that urban areas are lacking any wildlife and they are of no value, but instead some corners and areas in the urban setting can be really valuable, even much more valuable than the countryside nowadays. Because as we know, countryside is showered with pesticides every week almost, and urban areas usually do not have to suffer that. So that is why you can easily find more pollinators in urban areas than in rural areas.
That's such an important point, but I think it's interesting what you said there, that helping pollinating insects is good for the environment, which a lot of people are motivated by. But even if that's not something that people care about hugely, it's also true that they are hugely helpful for people who, like you said, have allotments, so they are beneficial for us as well. Is this something you find yourself explaining to people quite a lot?
Yes, because even if we are talking about helping pollinators, then too often, unfortunately, people are starting to think about mosquitoes and ticks, that if we are promoting pollinators, then we also are promoting all these nasty bugs that they do not like. So, of course, here in Tallinn also we have been mocked now and then that we're building a mosquito highway or tick boulevard, and instead of a linear park for both the biodiversity and the people.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what you've been doing there in Tallinn. I think one of the most interesting changes that people get really interested about when I talk about is simply this reduced cutting of the public grasslands. So for people who don't know anything about this, perhaps you could explain a little bit about how did this happen and what has the impact been?
Yes, a few years ago, Tallinn City decided that we need to mow less. And the reason is that, well, there are many reasons. how we finally came to it. First, people's attitudes towards mowing has been gradually changing. So, for example, 10 years ago, Tallinn city government got complaints from the citizens that why aren't you mowing? You should mow already. But gradually, we started to have more complaints, not that we are not mowing, but instead, why are you mowing? You don't have to mow because, for example, we have had the drought and you just produce dust here. So, yes, for example, 2 years ago, it happened that we had a very dry spring and we had very little lush vegetation back then. Since a year before, we had quite a similar situation and we got lots of bad press for mowing, although there wasn't anything particular to mow. Then this time we tried to be wiser and we didn't mow. And we didn't mow in public green areas for, I think it was 6 weeks or even in places more. And as a result, we had such a flower-rich city that everybody was actually surprised at what would happen to just ordinary lawns if you just don't mow every other week there. So it was really fantastic.
Isn't it incredible how quickly people's perceptions of what is normal and what should be done can change?
Yes, it was quite fascinating, yes.
And then the other major project that we talked about when I was there visiting in Tallinn was the Pollinator Highway, which covers a lot of the city, goes right the way across the city. How does that work, and what's the impact of that been?
Pollinator Highway in Tallinn is a 13-kilometer long linear park which runs along a former railway line and former high voltage power line. So right now, neither of these infrastructures are present. There's no railway there, and air lines of this power line were put underground. So as a result, we managed to get this narrow but long strip of land running through 6 city districts where we needed to do something. We needed to bring it back to the urban area because it was just somewhere behind the corners there, and well, some parts were used for by the pedestrians and cyclists, but not the whole length. So the main concept of Pollinator Highway is to bring their biodiversity and also citizens, so that both biodiversity and the citizens can move through the city in a nice natural environment. And of course, we have to think what the citizens want there, and also what the different biodiversity groups want there. So for the biodiversity, we're trying to make them especially valuable for pollinators. We start to sow flower-rich meadows there, where the value right now is lacking, and for the people, some new sitting areas and places of interest where they can do sports and just walk around and enjoy the green strip of land there. So we are hoping to get the first stage of Pollinator Highway reconstructed and opened this summer. And since the first part of this, or the first stage of Pollinator Highway, runs through a district which is lacking green areas and also lacking places of activity for the local people, then this is also quite an important part of this concept on this in this first stage. But since before we developed the pollinator highway concept, we also made an inventory of biodiversity and plants there, especially pollinators and plants. Then we know that, for example, which parts of the pollinator highway are currently of high value, of medium value, of low value, and the first stage is has one of the lowest values. So we are currently sowing wildflower meadow seeds there, so that it would be of higher value, although the total area of the greenery there will be somewhat smaller, but the value will be higher.
And this connects back to what you were saying about the role of the citizens. And this is something that I really love, is this involvement in these projects with the whole city, basically. And I was very interested when we talked before about, you seemed to be very interested in the education side of helping people understand the impacts that they can have, for example, in someone's private garden. And I think you've been working on kind of a database of native wildflowers that, if people want to bring them into their part of the city, then you're helping them understand, the value for pollinators and as we're saying, this role that regular people can have, even if they perhaps aren't super knowledgeable about biodiversity. So perhaps you could explain a little bit more about that.
Yes. Well, the construction of the pollinator highway or the landscaping work is not the only part what we did back then, because before we started developing the landscape sketches of the pollinator highway, we asked the people what they are doing there and what they want to do there. And this was also a very important part of the input that landscape architects got, so that they also got to understand what the local citizens want, and we also provided the information what the biodiversity wants there. So this is how this was developed. But of course, we tested the ideas, and we tested different plans with local citizens in libraries, in kindergartens, in schools. And as you just described, we also developed a database of plants, garden plants and natural plants that everybody could sow or plant in their garden, in their yard, in their community garden or allotment garden, that are of value to pollinators. Because there's some information, for example, lavenders are good for pollinators, but of course you can list 10 more plant species, but actually we are using tens and hundreds, maybe thousands of plant species and varieties in gardens, and but what are their value? So this is something that we try to tackle, that we gathered information about the value of different popular and not so popular decorative species that people are planting and sowing to show that they may look similar, but they may have quite a different value for pollinators. And as a matter of fact, it turns out that quite a lot of annuals that are very lush and beautiful and colorful, they are of very low value. But instead, the perennials tend to have quite a good value for pollinators. Some are good, some are excellent, and this is the information that we try to forward to our citizens.
Yes, it's an important point that it's not necessarily all the plants that are the most beautiful that we want to be encouraging. Actually, it's sometimes the ones that are most kind of everyday, not super interesting to look at, but they can be the ones that are most valuable for the pollinating insects that we want to help.
Yes, and even grasses. Many grasses are important. They are absolutely useless. For example, bumblebees, because they provide nothing for the bumblebees. But some grasses are very important for butterfly larvae. So you have to take into consideration different aspects, because pollinator is just a word, but it consists of species groups that have so different ecology, and they some need pollen, the others need the nectar, third ones need the green parts. So this is really a very diverse world, and if you want to benefit all the different types of pollinators, then you have to take into consideration also the ecology of them.
That was Meelis Uustuu, Nature Conservation Specialist for Tallinn City. If you'd like to know more about Tallinn's reduced mowing or the creation of the Pollinator Highway, then you're only a few hours away from being able to pick up a copy of my book, Wild Cities, published this Thursday. And if you enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating or maybe tell a friend. Wild Cities was supported by the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation's Public Understanding of Science and Technology. This episode was presented and produced by me, Chris Fitch. In the next episode, fighting light pollution in Arizona. See you then.